Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. It's really welcome to the LearnML AI in School Education webinar. My name is Yorgos Giannakakis, and I will be your moderator for this event. It's quite exciting to actually be here with all these hundreds of registrants that have been participating in this event. And today we have prepared for you a quite unique webinar within the areas of AI in school education. So basically what you will be taught today, we will take you through a learning experience of the core principles of AI and machine learning within primary and secondary school education through games. So let me basically take you through our program today. So we'll start with a welcome note from Mr. Kouanis, President and CEO of the National Center of Audiovisual Media and Communication. Then I will move on into the details and the core objectives and the vision of the LearnML project, which is essentially the project that endorses this event. It's a multiplier event of this project. We then move on to Dr. Camilleri. She will be taking us through the main challenges of teaching and learning artificial intelligence in schools. Then a team from Norway, Professor Giannakos, Dr. Papamitziou, and Dr. Papavlasopoulou, will take us through the core aspects of what we call the LearnML educational framework in Europe, the educational framework that implements artificial intelligence in primary and secondary school. And then finally, we have an invited a guest speaker, invited talk by Dr. Alex Grech, the director of Commonwealth Center and Connected Learning. He's going to introduce us to the current challenges in education crisis and connected learning. Then after the break, there will be a new session, a workshop in Greek this time. This first session is in English. What is important to note is that we are broadcasting live on Facebook, as you might know. So if you have any questions for us during the talks, please go ahead and just write something on the chat box of Facebook, any comment you might have, any question, and then those questions will be transferred directly to us to address them from our speakers. So yeah, keep that in mind. And then all of you that have registered to our workshop later on the day after the break, you will be watching basically presentations and live demonstrations of games from Dr. Iliro Voulgari, Ilias Stouraitis, and Dr. Kostas Karpouzis from National Technical University of Athens. But that will follow in after the break at 5:30 Greek time. So without further delay, I would like to welcome Panos Kouanis here, who is the President and CEO of the National Center for Audiovisual Media and Communication, that stands for ECOME in Greek. Panos has worked in both the private and public sector in Greece and abroad, and he's the President and CEO of ECOME since 2017. He holds a PhD in communication and BC in economics from the School of Economics, University of Athens, and an MSc in broadcasting and film from the College of Communication from Boston University. Panos has extensive experience in all aspects of the media industry, including film and TV production, marketing, distribution and sales, new media, and ICT, information communication technologies. Now, Panos directs ECOME, whose mission is the protection, support, promotion of public and private entities in the field of audiovisual media and communication in Greece. ECOME is one of the most important initiatives, arguably, and interventions of the Greek administration in audiovisual production, entrepreneurship, and education, which aims to support them as key financial development components in the country. So we are deeply honored that we have Panos here with us. So Panos, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, George, for your kind words and your introduction. Good afternoon to everybody. And thank you for inviting me to have a brief welcome speech at your webinar. I personally think that today's webinar touches upon a very current and hot topic, that of digital literacy in school education. Our organization, ECOME, the National Center of Audiovisual Media and Communication in Greece, from the very beginning in 2018, showed great interest and placed in the forefront of its activities MIL, Media Information Literacy, and gaming, and the way these two interact with each other. And that is because we understand that all over the world increasingly, not only young people, but people of all ages play digital games. And as a consequence, we have to explore the extent to which digital games may facilitate learning and information literacy. Even more, with the rapid development of artificial intelligence and machine learning and their application in gaming, gaming has gone to a totally new level. Overall gaming experience has been enhanced, making games smarter than ever and more real, transforming also the skills of game developers. Artificial intelligence and machine learning have created and will keep on creating a huge impact on the production of digital games. Since the information turns out to be increasingly accessible and simplified to the normal game developers, we are probably going to see an immense move to further develop visuals and characters that can make their own storylines. Nowadays, new artificial intelligence techniques and algorithms are developing, giving an exciting opportunity for game developers to showcase their full potential. To this end, we have taken several initiatives here at ECOME, such as we created in 2018 our first white paper on MIL, the first and only so far in Greece, which was our initial point of view and strategic guide for MIL for the first 3 years of our operation. In this paper, we stressed the necessity of information literacy and the use of gaming technology in education and training. Today, as many things have changed since then, both within our organization and also in the world, we are currently reviewing it, and soon we will announce a new strategy for the years to come regarding MIL at ECOME. We also became the coordinator of the European subchapter Mediterranean Group of the UNESCO MIL Alliance, an alliance of more than 600 educational institutions all over the world. Through this alliance, by exchanging ideas and by partnering on projects with institutions from all over the world, we can promote more effectively digital literacy in our region, the Mediterranean, and our country, Greece, of course. We also organized and participated in many educational and research projects in the past 3 years with academic institutions from all over Europe, with an aim to promote and advance digital literacy and the use of gaming in learning in primary and secondary education, academic education, as well as in professional training. We have created also 2 very strong financial tools targeted to professional game developers to promote the production of games in Greece. The one is the well-known cash rebate of 40% of eligible costs incurred in Greece, and the other is a tax relief of 30% for resident companies or individuals who invest in the development of digital games in Greece. I urge you to visit our website and check all our activities related to digital literacy, and especially check out our financial incentives. I personally believe they are very attractive and apply both to local and international game developers. You may also contact us. Our email addresses are on the website, which is www.ecome.media. Now, our latest initiative towards placing digital literacy and gaming in school education is the International School Student Competition for the creation of table and digital games, which will start in a few days. Through this initiative, organized together with the General Secretariat of Digital Governance, the Hellenic Association of Computer and Communication Engineers, and the region of Attica, we are aiming towards mobilizing students of secondary education to create either table games or digital games based on themes from Greek history, from the ancient times to contemporary Greece. You may find the rules and regulations of the competition on our website. So far, school teachers have expressed a huge interest, and I'm looking forward to the creation of the school students. Closing now, I would like to thank the partners of this program for inviting me, the University of Malta, and especially Professor George Giannakakis, the Norwegian University of Science Technology, the Science Center of Malta, from Greece, the National Technical University in Greece, and the Koreis Educational Enterprises Palladio. Once more, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for participating in this webinar. So stay tuned. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Panos. Thank you for the warm words. Thank you for being here. And that gives me actually an excellent pass to basically the introduction of this project and what it is about. And which is whatever you see today, basically, and throughout this 2 hours of talks and then a dedicated workshop for in Greek for educators is endorsed by a project called Learn to Machine Learn. So what I will be trying to do in the next 5 minutes or so, or 10 minutes or so, is to basically tell you a bit more about this project, what it is about, its core objectives, its mission, and what we are actually trying to achieve here within the next 2 years or so. So before doing that, I just want to dedicate a few slides on the place that I work and coordinates this project along with many other universities and centers in Europe, as you will note. This is the Institute of Digital Games at the University of Malta that coordinates LearnML. It features about 20 academics and researchers. It's highly multidisciplinary and multicultural, as you might be able to see from the photos here. And it's basically the center of excellence within game design, game artificial intelligence, game studies, and a number of people that actually are very active researchers within these areas of research and education. We actually host a graduate program in game design, game technology, and game analysis, and we actually publish quite actively within these areas. Now, one of the things that we do well is attracting grants for running European projects like LearnML within the areas of game-based learning, game-based education, computational creativity, the intersection of human and computational creativity, and so on, even culture and so on. So one of the projects that actually runs as we speak is this one, LearnML, and this is exactly what I will be talking about now, and all speakers will dedicate their time later on. So what is LearnML? LearnML is a 3-year project, started last year. There's still 2 years left on the way. There might be a COVID-19 adjustment, so the project might run a bit more than usual. It is a strategic partnership for school education. It's an Erasmus Plus project that basically brings together University of Malta, the National Technical University of Athens, Palladio schools Palladio Korai schools in Athens, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and Science Center in Malta, which is a part of the Ministry of Education in Malta. Now, LearnML focuses on artificial intelligence. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, we usually, some of us at least, think of something quite evil or something that is going to dominate our lives in the future, or is going to sort of take our jobs, completely change the way we think, change the society in negative ways, let's put it this way. Now, the aim of the LearnML project is basically to accept the fact that artificial intelligence is everywhere in our lives, from mobile phones all the way to the cars that we drive, all the way to the ways we interact with the web and anything that is interactive nowadays, and bring all that current revolution of digital transformation and artificial intelligence to early stages of education. So artificial intelligence has been taught in universities for the last 50 or 60 years, since the birth of AI back in the 50s, but it only recently got the attraction, let's say, or the interest of primary and secondary school education. Why do we think this is important? Because we believe we need to get students engaged at early stages so that they become responsible citizens of Europe in the near future. So we are talking about citizens that they know what AI is, the basic core aspects of AI, but they also know they can deal with the ethical aspects and the dangers, the threats, and the limitations of artificial intelligence. Now, at the same time, we experience a growth in what is called game development and game design. And not only AI is everywhere you look, but also games are everywhere you look. I mean, everyone has a mobile phone with a few games. Everyone plays games nowadays. According to a study, by 2024, half of the Earth's population will actually be active gamers. So if you put the two things together, if you put on one end the fourth industrial revolution of artificial intelligence, on the other end, the growth of games, especially in the era we experience, then you meet a great marriage between two revolutions, a game revolution, a game development revolution, and AI revolution. So we thought that the best way to actually teach children about artificial intelligence is through games. So some of you educators might have been using games in your classrooms. It is a great way to actually teach about many things. So we thought, how about we actually use games to teach about AI, about machine learning, and about the ethical constraints of AI. So to put it formally, the vision of this project is to produce an innovative solution for the teaching and learning of crucial 21st century skills relating to digital literacy, computational thinking, and artificial intelligence. What we want to achieve is basically develop children and teenagers into responsible citizens and insightful thinkers. That is our main aim, basically. Now, you might wonder how we're going to do that. Well, the idea is to transfer the notion from digital literacy to AI literacy and bring AI literacy from university education to primary and secondary education. And because we enter that world of children within these forms of education, primary and secondary, we aim to introduce students to AI through a set of games, through what we call a uniquely designed game-based educational toolbox that you will get your hands on today, or get an idea of what we're actually designing and what we have designed so far later on in the presentations to follow. Now, the key objectives of the project is first to design a framework, an educational framework within the primary and secondary educational setting. And we have that ready. It will be presented later on by the Norwegian team. Then we, based on that framework, we plan to implement games and game-based toolboxes that realizes a certain set of machine learning scenarios, and based on both the games and the framework to produce relevant and effective teaching scenarios and learning material. Then, having all this in hand, we can educate teachers to effectively engage students and promote creative reflection of AI ethics and concerns regarding data biases and societal implications. Finally, we plan to widely involve students in these courses so that they become what we call the AI literate and responsible students of the future, especially with regards to ethics and threats of artificial intelligence. Now, at the beginning of as I said, this is the first year of the project, and we have been through several workshops with the educators, have been reviewing the literature quite extensively, and we have also been designing and developing games. And one of the things that we came up with, obviously, as a first idea is to look at Minecraft as a game, which is quite popular within education, and try to integrate AI teaching through Minecraft. So what you will see here in this video is basically a number of parameters that the student can change. So this corresponds to a brain, let's say, of a child, of an AI algorithm. This corresponds to how much time we let the algorithm to learn about a task. And then the student can test the developed algorithm within Minecraft. The character of Minecraft goes from A to B, tries to achieve a task. Sometimes the character actually fails to do that. Sometimes it actually succeeds. So through this interaction with parameters of the algorithm, students can reflect on the core principles of supervised learning in this particular case, right? Now, because Minecraft is a great tool and a great game, we started with that, but there's so much more you can do, actually. And I would like to share some current developments when it comes to game design and development here. What we're trying to achieve here is, let's call it a reinforcement learning scenario. Reinforcement learning is a basic principle of machine learning where an agent, an algorithm learns through experience of good rewards and bad penalties. So the child controls this character in this sort of 3D dungeon game and can specify, negative penalties that the agent should avoid and positive rewards that the game character should collect so that a mission is completed. And then the child can also control particular parameters of the interaction with the algorithm, such as how much my algorithm needs to explore new strategies, how much my characters should instead exploit existing knowledge. And another scenario that we're actually currently working on is using artificial intelligence to classify between, let's say, paintings versus sculptures in this sort of culture-inspired scenario that you see here. This is a mock-up version of the game that we currently design. So the child is actually labeling paintings versus sculptures, can actually swipe paintings to the left versus sculptures to the right, and then you have an algorithm that actually learns the paintings or learns from the data set actually that the child provides. So with games, with simple games like that, not only we can train students in primary and secondary school about the basic concepts of supervised learning, the basic concepts of reinforcement learning, but we can also, through their interaction with the games, we can also have them engage and reflect upon ethical choices about the ways they select data and how their selections actually affect the performance of an algorithm, and what this behavior of the algorithm actually, and in which ways it can affect society at large, the classroom, or the economy even. So all these are interesting reflections that educators can have with children based on their game interactions. And obviously, beyond Minecraft and the things that we design currently within LearnML, we have been doing an extensive literature review of the state of the art and state of practice in using games for teaching AI, or using software for teaching AI in young ages. And in there, you will meet things like the Teachable Machine software by Google, where children can actually pick particular they can actually generate their own data set, and they can let Google and the computer vision system of Google to actually learn to classify between, a duck versus an apple versus a pear, and so on. You have things like this software, Semiconductor, right? Which is basically, you can interact with AI, and you can actually use your body through a sophisticated computer vision system and orchestrate an artificial orchestra, right? You have Minecraft Edu, through which you can do quite a lot of design and develop new scenarios for teaching aspects of artificial intelligence. And you have things like machine learning for kids, which features a Scratch learning environment where children can actually use Scratch, collect examples of images, and train models. So it features a quite interesting way of training and teaching children the basics of machine learning and supervised learning in particular. So if you want to know more about our project, you can visit our webpage. It's learnml.eu. And you can follow our YouTube channel here, follow us on Twitter, and like us, as you have been doing over Facebook. So with that in mind, and basically, I would like to thank you for your attention, for so far at least. So we will be transferring questions from Facebook directly to our Zoom channel here. So I got one here from Facebook. Could you tell us which is the tool used for this categorization, paintings versus sculptures? Okay, so if you refer to the algorithm that we will be using, or tool we will be using, we are still undecided about this. There's a lot of variety when it comes to categorizing paintings from sculptures, from images. And in terms of data set, we will be using public access data sets from museums and so on. And in terms of algorithms, we might be using existing tools, or we might develop our own algorithms for classification. Anything from neural networks all the way to decision trees, if you're familiar with those algorithms. But it's still undecided. It's under development as we speak. So I think, yeah, I think we can safely move on to our next speaker, which is Vanessa Camilleri. Vanessa, can you hear me? Maybe you can actually share your screen already.
Yes, I can hear you.
So Vanessa, let me do a quick introduction while you're sharing. I can stop.
Yeah, you have to stop the screen sharing, please.
Yep. So Vanessa Camilleri is a co-principal investigator at the University of Malta at the Faculty of ICT. She will be taking us through challenges that we often meet when it comes to teaching and learning artificial intelligence. And she has been publishing a great book on the topic. So the stage is yours, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as Georgios was saying, this project is all about bringing artificial intelligence to children, younger or even not so young students. But the idea is that why do we need artificial intelligence? Because artificial intelligence is around us already. It's there. As Georgios said, we make use of it. Every time we go to Amazon to buy something, we're presented with similar products that other shoppers have purchased. Therefore, we're seeing this kind of data analysis in machine learning. We're also presented with alternative products to buy, and that's again prediction about your preferences as a user. So artificial intelligence is already there. There are various aspects of life that we use it. So why should every child learn about artificial intelligence is quite simple, really, because they live in a world that's already seeing the emergence of artificial intelligence in a number of issues, fields, and domains. But it's also because as we advance more, we're going to see more and more artificial intelligence emerging in the presence of our everyday lives. As Georgios said, one interesting aspect that's also coming out, even in this project, is the series of misconceptions and maybe preconceptions of what artificial intelligence really is. We see children growing up in this era, in the era of digital information and artificial intelligence, and they still don't know exactly what it is. When asked about artificial intelligence, they don't really know what artificial intelligence is all about. What we want to do is, let the children peek under that hood, okay, of artificial intelligence and understand more what's beneath, so that they can not only relate more, but they can understand it more, recognize it more, and then build it more. So one issue which comes to mind when we talk about the challenges to teaching AI is why teach it? Because if we don't know the real reason why, then we really don't understand the importance of it. So why teach it? Well, first of all, AI exposes children to problem solving. It's kind of thinking that goes beyond just knowing what is beyond the digital interface, but exposes them to a kind of way of thinking that students really need to think about what's happening. What is the problem here? Can I find a way of actually solving a problem? How can I use machines to help me solve that problem? So that's one aspect of it. It also exposes children to coding skills. When we talk about coding, it's like a language paradigm. The earlier you expose a child to a language, the easier it is for the child to take it up. And coding becomes pretty much the same. So there has been in recent years, we've seen quite a push from various, international agencies, not just at the European level, but we've seen, loads of schools and courses online in teaching children coding skills. Again, coding introduces the children to another way of solving problems or looking at problems. So coding does help this sort of logic and mathematical reasoning that can be then applied to many endeavors by the children. So as we say, children are now growing up with computers, tablets, smartphones. They are very comfortable using them. They can incorporate them. but learning to code is exactly as I said before, like the analogy of the hood of the car. You lift it up, you see what's inside, and you see what the engine is all about, and then you start to try and understand more about it. In this way, what we aim to do is to empower children to become creators with technology rather than just consumers, not just as consumers, but as creators of technology. As Hirsa has said, this project also is working with games, because we know that games are, artificial intelligence in its starting form. It started trying to make a computer, a machine, learn how to play games, how to win at games. So the combination between AI and gaming is there, but the idea of using games, which children work so well with, which children know so well and understand and can relate so well, to be able to teach these concepts, these underlying concepts of AI, it works very well. So this is complementary when we talk about AI and games. It also brings about a certain immersion, certain engagement with the concepts. Again, we know that games are also increasingly becoming more and more part of the curriculum. So we do that. It also, when we talk about AI, we also talk about data and the idea of having children understand the importance of data and becoming more fluent in this data. Data is very, very important for AI. So children have to understand a little bit more about how the analysis of data can occur, how data can be collected. But beyond that, we also have to try and instill from the children right from the start that there can be a bias in the data. And following this bias, then we can have far more serious ethical issues which we really need to contend with and which we really need to take into consideration. Sometimes we don't consider the effects and the consequences of certain biased data. And when this comes to mind, then we really need to think about it. And this is why also this project intends to take on aspects of ethics and also of philosophy. So then we also have this idea of opening up these critical discussions about humanity, about ethics and about philosophy. What if machines were to take decisions on behalf of humans, for example? What can happen? And how would machines take these decisions? Would it be on unbiased data, but then who decides which data is made available for the machines to be able to reason and take a decision about a certain issue? So here we open up these discussions, and we also try to think a little bit more beyond, thinking a robot that cleans the floor or a robot that comes into our home and cooks for us. So there are these issues as well. Again, we start them early. Maybe they can make better choices when it comes to future design and development of AI. So what to teach in AI then? I think that one of the most fundamental issues, and also one which is also the major challenge in AI, is that AI should not be seen as a subject by itself there hanging in midair. I think it's very important here that we relate it to the multiple disciplines, within the multiple disciplines that are taught across the curriculum. This is very important because otherwise there is no contextualization. It is important so that the children can actually realize the real life situations where AI is impinging and is impacting. We also need to teach that machines perceive the world through sensors, that machines don't see it with our own eyes. There has to be sensor, and therefore this paves the way for data. And what sort of data comes in? What sort of sensors do we use? How much data? Where from? What are we going to do with this data? And how much data is needed for an agent to be trained properly, like the one we saw in the game that Jorgos showed us. And again, here comes the ethics, that AI is not just negative, it's not just taking over the world, and it's not just positive, it's not panacea, but it can impact society in many positive and negative ways. And we need to really think a little bit about these and understand a little bit more, and have children understand it. Sometimes we might think that these questions might be too high level for the students, for children, but in reality, we do realize that in schools, children can have quite a reflective attitude towards certain concepts. And we can use this particular project and the workshops that we propose and the ideas that we propose, the guidelines that we propose, to bring about such discussions. So then we go to the challenges to teaching AI and learning AI. And one is really very, very important, and that's removing these misconceptions about AI. How can we start from the bottom up to try and build foundations, to try and understand exactly what we mean by AI, how AI is being used, in which ways we can adapt and adopt AI, what sort of problems can currently be solved with AI, and what sort of problems can be solved maybe in the future with AI? What sort of directions do we need? You know, we hear so much of so many developments and so many ideas, but you know, AI taking over the world, as we said before. But really and truly, how possible is this? How feasible is this at this point in time currently? What do the experts out there, what do the professionals say about development of AI? Where are we? Okay, and what can AI do at this moment in time? And how can we continue this work? So that's one important issue. The second one is also relating concepts to real life situations. Sometimes we know that AI is you know, around us. We know that we might use AI, but we might run, as teachers, as educators, we might run out of ideas about how AI is exactly impinging real life situations. And so we need that additional guide and additional help to be able to understand how this AI is helping us or hindering us in certain situations. So this is where we come to needing, as educators, and also doing ourselves a guided structure. But it's not just this guided structure. We still have to maintain some flexibility for students to be able to think critically and reason logically about you know, how they can best program an artificial intelligence to solve certain problems. So we need a structure as educators, but we also need to allow for that flexibility for students to think out of the box. And that's a challenge in itself. And finding support materials. And this is why this project is very important, because this project aims just at providing support materials for educators to try and overcome these challenges to teaching AI, to be able to understand a little bit more about how to integrate them with cross-curricular subjects, for example, with subjects like music, with subjects like history, or with subjects like math or physics. So how can we start? Where do we start from? Where do we find all these resources, these help? And this project aims to actually do that, to provide such supporting materials for teachers. As Kyrgios said, we have also published a book which will be accessible over the website, over the LearnML website. And it's an accompanying guide that uses some concepts of AI and makes use of these concepts of AI and aims to bring them across in the classroom without the use of any digital devices. We thought about this idea, this concept, because there are times in a classroom where making use of digital devices may not be possible. Due to certain limitations, maybe limitations in the amounts of digital devices, maybe limitations in accessing the lab or the Wi-Fi and IT. So there are problems like that across schools. So we still wanted to get across these
concepts as Georgios mentioned as well, like reinforcement learning, like search algorithms, but also concepts about ethics and the philosophy behind AI. So we put together this guide, which is a guide that is for teachers and for young people, for children, for students. It has, in fact, two parts of it. One part is for teachers that would provide the teachers with, as I'm saying, support materials in terms of guides, in terms of information, in terms of ways of proposing certain discussions that can arise in the classroom, but also hands-on activities using, pen and paper and scraps that you might find around, making use of different objects that are easily accessible. And basically, this can be done in groups or individual or within a classroom setting, but also not just even in other settings as well. So this is an accompanying material that we have put together. But the idea is also, there's another important challenge, is that whatever is provided through this project is not just something that can be used standardized. One has to make allowance for creating activities of one's own, depending on your classroom as educators. So the ability of somebody to create activities that would somehow, generate inclusion, independent and irrelevant of gender and ability of learning. It's the idea that one can adapt, not just adopt, certain activities to the students in front of them, and still bring about these concepts of the important concepts of artificial intelligence. That's a challenge in itself. And the idea of the project is actually to help and somehow guide people to better, or to empower people to better be able to create such activities. Okay, so how to teach AI? Well, we build it on 3 building blocks, which is recognize AI, use AI, and build AI. So a child, a student, a young person has to recognize what works with AI, and then be able to use AI to be able to build AI. And so, as I said in the beginning, we empower students to become not just simple users, consumers of technology, of AI, but also creators of AI. And that's behind it. So yes, Georgios, I don't want to take more of the time, but if there are any questions which people would like to ask, please feel free to ask them.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. There is a question actually coming from Facebook chat, which is, if I may, yeah, isn't maybe a kind of contribution to gaming addiction if we don't learn how specifically to use gaming as a learning method?
No, I do not see that as contributing to gaming addiction. First of all, there is no absolute research that indicates that games would generate more addiction. And one has to think about in terms of a person's predisposition to addiction. That's the first thing. And secondly, we use the games, but in reality, it's how you lead the games, how you guide gaming, and how you guide this gaming activity within the classroom. So one doesn't just play whatever they want to play, for how long they play it. There is always that kind of guidance. There's always the briefing before the start of the lesson, before the start of the gaming experience, to be followed by the briefing after the gaming experience. So you, as an educator, as a guide, you're there to be able to direct your students to whatever you want to lead them to. So in the case of, for example, these games that we have in LearnML, if we want to understand more about reinforcement learning or what happens, what the AI does during reinforcement learning, or how machine learning happens when we are training a particular algorithm, then your briefing and the briefing is directly related to those specific questions. Don't know if have I answered your question.
It sounded quite satisfactory to me, at least. I hope it did to the person that asked. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
You can stop sharing your screen so that we can move on to the next presentation, which comes from Professor Giannakos, Dr. Papavlasopoulou, and Dr. Papamiciou. This is a team from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and they have been working hard in developing what we call the LearnML educational framework over the last 6 or so, more than 6 months actually. And they will share their experiences today with us. So the stage is yours. Sophia, are you starting with this?
Yes, I'm now sharing the screen. Yeah. Thank you very much, Yorgos, and welcome everyone. So as Yorgos said, we are a team that works on the LearnML project from Norway at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology and the Department of Computer Science. Professor Michalis Giannakos, Hara Papamiciou, and me, Sophia Papavlasopoulou. And I will talk about the LearnML framework that was also the first intellectual output of the project. So the framework aims to support the actions of the project and first examines the background of the existing practices and investigates in general what is the state of the art of introducing AI and machine learning to the young students. The focus, of course, it's on game-based learning, and the goal is for students to enjoy the process of discovering their own knowledge, and through this learning experience, be very active. And the concept behind this is learning through repetition, maybe failure, and the accomplishments of goals. So students work toward a goal, choose their actions, and experience the consequences of their actions. They practice the right way to do things and having as a result an active learning experience. Also, we examine the needs of the teachers and the students and what is happening at a school context maybe, and see on how to design effective learning experiences for them, including all the learning outcomes that we desire and the possible evaluation methods. So in general, as it has already been said, there are many countries who have integrated computer science and information technology in their curricula. And now, of course, AI and machine learning are a new topic in the pre-college education. So it is important for children to gain computational thinking, have digital literacy, which is broadly interpreted as the ability to use and also understand, evaluate technology, and understand the technological strategies required to develop their own solutions and realize specific goals. Students should also be aware of the limitations and have awareness of all the ethical, cultural, and social implications. For example, how we use the social media, the fake news, all the ethics around them, and so on. Also, they should gain critical thinking and with all the other learning objectives, have fruitful hands-on experience designing their own AI and machine learning systems and make other practical examples. So we did a thorough literature review and we found many tools that support the game-based learning approach for AI and machine learning. For example, these are 3 random examples of tools that do that. Another well-known is the Minecraft, Hour of Code AI for Good. And some of them provide good practices by offering also lesson plans, additional activities, and other resources for the teachers, but also for the children who want to try alone those kind of activities and those tools. We also see that there are some games that can that have different opportunities and teach different concepts and topics of AI and machine learning. But also there are games like the one you see on the screen on the left that build on previous knowledge. And for example, they use well-known and widely used coding environments like the one with Scratch, and they just give an extension that provides the AI and machine learning experience to the children. However, what is understood is that students and teachers require more than to have a game to approach artificial intelligence and machine learning. And therefore, we did 3 workshops, or one at each country of the project in Greece, Malta, and Norway. Some countries repeated the workshop and did it for 2 or 3 times. And also in Greece, we had one workshop with students that it was really valuable to get their insights. And we invited teachers, researchers, practitioners, and we discussed about the current state in their countries. We showed them the tools that exist now with a goal to inform them first for the ones that they don't know, and also understand their needs and see on how we can further help them with the project's action to be able to facilitate these in their class activities. The photos you see here are all from the workshop that we did in our countries. And at the end, the researchers that were facilitating the workshops collected the ideas that emerged in post-it notes, and we presented the results in relevant categories. You can also see a photo of how we collected all the data. And we came up with guidelines, learning objectives, learning scenarios, and we revealed the most important requirements for the effectiveness and adoption, and the impact of introducing AI and machine learning. So now I will present the most important outcomes of the workshops. So first of all, we have the learning objectives. So again, here are the most important that were revealed from our workshops. So first of all, children should recognize AI applications in the real world, be aware of the existence of ethical problems, have a functional understanding of ML, understand the outcome of a simple ML application and be able to perform one, and also understand what training the data means. And now, we move on to the evaluation. So how we can evaluate such an intervention at school and how we can introduce machine learning and AI to children, which is a challenge to be introduced in an official classroom, and what are our approaches on how to evaluate and assess that kind of intervention. So first of all, we suggest that we do observations of the activities and see how students work. Perform questionnaires after and before the activity to be able to understand what they learned. Collect of students' projects and see if they actually managed to develop what they were asked to. Conduct individual interviews if we are able to get more in depth to what they understood and how much they were engaged in the activity. And lastly, perform group discussions with all the children and possibly ask them on how they think that they can create something for social good or for their everyday lives and how they can implement it. So lastly, I will close this presentation with the challenges that were revealed from these workshops. And those are the input that we give to the next phases of the project to address these challenges. So first of all, there is a need for the teachers to use simple learning scenarios and preferably connect those scenarios with real life actions. So we have to be aware that since also coding is a requirement for some of those tools for AI and machine learning, students will probably have different level of knowledge, and we want to make sure that all the students are equally engaged and support them accordingly. We want also to build requirements for the games to be developed further in the project and design the games and what has primarily to be addressed in these games. Also, we know that teachers have a lack of appropriate training, and they don't have appropriate supportive materials to do those kind of activities. And it's also difficult from them to change, for example, their teaching routine. Coding and information technology and other related subjects, they are not faced at the same level of attention from all the countries. In some of them is just an elective course, in some others don't. And so teachers have different challenges. And we need to come up with alternatives and adjustable scenarios to have the most learning outcomes and be integrated in class activities. And by talking about class activities, this can also, we have also to think that this might be a workshop or as part of a 45 minutes course in a school class. And that was all from me. And I want to thank you very much for your attention. And please stay in touch with the project's communication channels and follow the progress and see our future actions, because we need your feedback and we want to develop the best experience both for the games and for their further integration in the classrooms.
Thank you very much, Sofia. We have a number of questions actually coming from Facebook Live. There's some comments as well. There's a comment about ReadyAI actually.org. Students are very comfortable about AI and machine learning. We just finished an eTwinning project on introducing AI in primary and secondary schools. They could play in program ML models. That's exciting to hear, and it's thanks for the pointer. I guess that's
from which country? Greece, right?
Not sure.
Okay.
Not sure about that.
Very interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like complementary approaches to teaching AI, which is thanks for the pointer, and stay in touch. We need to work together. Then there's like a couple of more questions about is there a framework or a model to consider while designing courses to teach AI concepts, especially in primary education sector? Can you take this, Sofia?
Yeah, actually, it depends a lot on the country and on what each probably curricula has to do. But what we see, it's like we have to start easy on this and be aware that some of the students would be a bit more confident on that. So we have to make sure that we start with the basics and the teachers introduce what is machine learning and AI, and probably include some coding activities for the children to go on, because we have noticed that if they get frustrated from the beginning, then it's not so easy for them to continue. So this is one tip that we want to do. And also the choice of the tool is a critical thing that we need to consider as well.
Yeah. That's great. And I think also Michalis shared your report and a paper, which is basically the outcome of this framework, and people can have a look there. There's one more question about if we've made something like scratch blocks with a neural network, which can make a neural network. That is an approach we could follow, but we will focus on making games that they teach AI instead of staying on the scratch level. Which is, putting together code neural networks or code decision trees. Instead, we want children to learn on a high level instead of coding neural networks. Learn about the basic principles of neural networks and the core parameters of neural networks, let's say, or any other algorithm within the supervised or reinforcement learning section. Of AI.
Here, so maybe if I can also add, like for example, in the book, AI in Education, we teach about neural networks, just using, for example, cups and various small objects. And we try to understand how sorting can occur depending on the various variables or layers that are created. So, you know, it can take different approaches, and there are again various other applications and programs online that would teach students to build sort of AI using, for example, neural networks. So, yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa. Sophia, is Michalis running the next session, or we go to... Oh, Michalis is running the next session. So yes, before we move on to Alex.
I will stop sharing my screen.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, that's nice. Thank you, Sophia. And if I can add something on what has already been said, is that we provide a set of technologies that can be used for teaching AI in schools, but it's important to contextualize them. So what we're doing is we're offering how the different tools, what do they focus into, if they're focusing on reinforcement learning, on neural networks, how those tools can be used in different setups and classrooms. And of course, when you have computer science and programming course, it's much easier to implement them. But you can see from something simple like Scratch to more advanced tools that can be used. So now, since we have been talking about, let me share my screen as well, games a lot, it's time to use a game to see what you think about the workshops of the seminar so far. And there is going to be some delay here, so we will try to not be very rash. So we have a few questions based on Kahoot. Some of you at least might know Kahoot is a game-based learning platform that we have developed in NTNU. So please use your mobile or type kahoot.it and use the code that you see to connect. Yes, I see participants getting in, and you don't have to use your name. You can use your initials if you don't want to reveal your name, or just your first name. It's not just a few questions. Yes, nice. And I guess Kahoot is a very good example on how technology developed in universities ended up being very useful to primary and secondary schools. Okay. I see people are joining. Maybe we should wait for one more minute to see how many people will join, because there's a small delay between the streaming and the streaming on Facebook and the Zoom. Okay, I think we should slowly start now. Yes, I think we should give probably a little bit more time. We should be a little bit more faster. Okay, I see also some comments that the delay is big. We're sorry for that. We didn't, yeah, we should have given a bit more time. Okay, and the last one is just write the first thing that comes into. Okay, so yes, thank you for participating. It's unfortunate that there was a delay and some of the people couldn't really engage with that. But I think we can now move to the next talk, Yorgos.
Thank you very much, Michalis. Thank you for running this. Despite the technical difficulties, we have some answers at least. I mean, we managed to make it interactive despite the lag. So thanks so much. So I would like to introduce our next speaker. Alex, you're here. I presume you can start sharing your screen while I'm introducing you. Alex Grech is the founding director of the Commonwealth Center for Connected Learning. He has advised multinational governments, NGOs, and startups in sectors ranging from ICT and neurosciences to culture and education. In the past decade, Alex has been working in EdTech, advising on digital education policy, 21st century skills agendas, and lifelong learning. He teaches new media literacy at the University of Malta within the Faculty of Media Knowledge and Knowledge Sciences, and he's an expert on 2ET 2020 working groups. Alex's research interests are in digital citizenship, blockchain and identity, social media, and power. Alex, we are very glad to have you around. We're looking forward to hear more about connected learning and the education crisis.
Thanks, Gorgos. I've been teaching for 2 hours, so I'm a bit revved up and in a totally different space at the moment, but I'm going to do my best for you. I'm basically come from 5 interconnected areas. When you get as old as I am, you've dabbled in a bit of these things. So I guess the views I'm going to share with you are the views of somebody who's been involved in public policy for many years, set up the Center for Connected Learning in 2016, 2017, primarily trying to figure out how people who know things can work with other people at a distance using technology, irrespective of geography and social capital. I teach new media. I've done quite a bit of work in Industry 4.0. In my previous life, God help us, I was in strategy and finance before getting into the change business. And I've published some stuff on the blockchain in education. I was the architect of the first nation state project called the BlockCerts, which basically means that most people in Malta of a certain age, from 15 upwards, can have their certificates registered on the blockchain. What this has to do with this particular lecture, I think two things. One is we're involved in a Horizon 2020 project called Dell for All, which started up on the 1st of January before the pandemic. And we were initially set out to build a whole ecosystem around people who were interested in the blockchain and AI and looking at the impact of those technologies on the future of education. COVID-19 changed all of that. Now it's a question of which technologies which are in operations now, from virtual reality, games, AI and blockchain, and even the very rudimentary technologies, which ones can help us repurpose the education that we have and that we need in the future once the pandemic has gone, we hope. And the second project which I'm involved in is I'm doing some work for the European Commission. There's quite a big project called Connecting Europe. And it's all around coming up with building blocks. I'm involved in the EPSI project, which is the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure Project. There are 4 big pilots happening right now as the EU starts to invest in this infrastructure, focusing on notarization, self-sovereign identity, diplomas, and the sharing of data. I'm very much involved in the diplomas side of things. Again, my invitation to you would be, and specifically dovetailing back to the Horizon 2020 project we're involved in, we would love to have the participation of people with an expertise in AI and games as we're building this community of expertise to try and figure out what we should do with education as it's in this kind of mode. I'm going to share with you 4 observations and 4 suggestions really on emerging edtech strategies. You're free to disagree with me. When you get to my age, you can be as dogmatic as you like, I guess. So 4 observations. My first observation is we've got a mess. The education model is pretty much nearly broken. Those of us who escaped from teaching overnight last March have got ourselves in a situation we're no longer in the class. And we've gone from this kind of scenario to, realizing that, again, a lot of the one-size-fits-all systems that we had really don't work anymore. We've gone from disconnected, learning to increasingly this need for more personalized learning. Do you remember these days when we used to have, people with shields in front of us? We thought that was a problem. Then we also realized that in other countries, some people are trying to figure out, is it worth their while, particularly in the US, to invest in very expensive college education? And also, those of us who are parents have realized for many years, kids come back home, having been incarcerated in a classroom for several hours, and are starting to get their education from very different sources, from the YouTubes of this world to the Future Learns of this world. And without the bricks and mortar universities recognizing it, there's a whole lot of informal learning going on, which seems to be, in a way, disconnected from what young people are using as tools to enhance their education. So, we're pretty much involved in our center in this network of educators and experts and people who are activists trying to find new ways of engaging with the education people need. COVID-19 has also meant this. We've, especially in the UK, for instance, about 2 million young people have been sent scattering all over universities in the UK to be immediately locked down under the premise that this is also education. In reality, what was happening is that, you've had, people trying to protect a very old bricks and mortar model. So this became de rigueur. People locked up, we think it's fine. This is called education. In reality, when the EU started looking at its digital education action plan, a lot of things where suddenly came, you know, it's all like came to the surface that a lot of people have never used online or distance learning before the crisis. That means educators, 95% of educators believe that COVID-19 is a point of no return for how technology is being used in education and training, that online learning resources and content need to be more relevant, interactive, and easy to use. And over 60% have improved their digital skills during the crisis, you know, and that more than 50% of respondents want to do more with technology. Second thing is that emerging technology as yet has still got to have an impact on education. And here I'm going to focus on things like the blockchain, where there have been a lot of promises about the blockchain being, you know, offering education decentralization, immutability, interoperability, self-sovereign identity and trust all in one solution. And I'm sure some of you who may have been interested in this space know that blockchain has long meant offering opportunities for new ways of looking at student records, identity, record management systems. Even the whole notion of a blockchain university was mooted several years ago and yet hasn't come to fruition from this point onwards. And if you think about it in the digital interactions, you know, people choose, you know, I mean, the blockchain enables people to choose which specific pieces of their own information, claims and credentials they can disclose to third parties, when in fact, verifiable credentials are really our credentials such as education degrees, business licenses, citizenship, which are issued by an authority or verifiable through a signature of an attestation user who can attest its validity. The reality is this: when we talk about self-sovereign identity, you know, we say that people have a right to create, own, and manage their own identity records in a manner which is private and with no dependency on a centralized authority. But this also implies recipient ownership and vendor independence. I'm talking a bit about blockchain really because this is one of those technologies which offered a lot of freedoms which we think that we need. The reality, however, is that improperly used, the blockchain, it just becomes an unnecessary, cumbersome technical layer. And in fact, when under Dare for All, we were looking at what emerging technologies can support digital learning in a higher education context, most people were identifying with very mundane things like VLEs, with conference tools, artificial intelligence and games, and I guess this is of relevance to you, were the ones which were creeping in at the lower end of the scale as to being useful for the education that we need. But if you think in terms of, we ask people about what, permanent post-pandemic challenges will be there for education. Most people are still at the stage of saying, well, more blended learning, more of a mix of online learning methods. We know that things will get digitized in the future, more multidisciplinary, but if you really dive deep down, we're still at this stage in November 2020, when we know something cataclysmic has happened, and we're trying to struggle as to what are we going to do about it. Third point is that I want to make is that decentralization, even though it seems to be a great thing, is really perceived to be a threat to governance. And by governance, I mean anything from the governance of central institutions like governments to universities, for instance. And you will find resistance in all sorts of places. Again, we're very amused, I guess, in March, because there were many people at the University of Malta who had spent many years resisting the whole notion of blended learning, let alone online learning. And suddenly there was emergency online teaching and learning happening within 24 hours. But people will find excuses by saying, there's little trust, especially if it comes to decentralized technologies, for instance. They will start talking to you about security and privacy layers and the cybersecurity sensitivity, and that technology needs to be mature. Remember, many of us focus on, especially those of us in research environments, tend to look into the future. Most people in decision-making positions will look at products, and by products, they mean something which has been tried and tested. Again, those of us who believe in open standards, a lot of people look at open standards as a threat to governance. And in fact, if you look at models like blockchain and Estonia, that has made a great job of marketing itself as a blockchain country, well, the Estonian model is neither open nor decentralized. The fourth point I want to make is that this thing called interoperability, and there is a lot of awareness or a lot of hype about how systems need to be interoperable. I mean, my view is that interoperability is not necessarily a technology issue. It really is a human issue. What I'm saying with you is, as a screen I used to share at the time when I was project managing the Malta Block Certs project, what you have there in front of you are the myriads of stakeholders and decision makers that came into play as we were trying to implement this piece of technology for the so-called public good. The point being made here is that human networks really cannot be automated. Not yet, not from my experience. So here are 4 suggestions, I guess, based on whatever little I know at this stage of my life. And I keep on looking up here because my cat has actually sneaked into my room and is currently sitting on my printer. 4 suggestions. The first one is, if you want to do something within the ambience of change, you really need to focus on disconnects where things don't work to determine where emerging technology can really add value to education. Look at where things are not working. That's a good point of departure. And again, on the basis of Dell for All, which we've had to upscale because of COVID, many people, and we're also comparing this data, what people are saying across the pond in the US. A lot of people are saying a lot of the infrastructure that we need isn't there. There's a huge lack of skills. And that while we continue to look at things like OER, open education resources, and VR and learning analytics, it's almost like we're at a dawn age, I guess. And people will keep on saying we need money, we need to focus on things like the Internet of Things. A lot of people get lost in the whole technology issue. My fear is that unless people focus on a real problem that needs to be fixed, we will go nowhere. The blockchain, for instance, for many years has been deemed to be a technology which is the equivalent of a hammer looking for a nail. If education is that nail, we have to make sure that we use the hammer properly right now. Let's look what the pain is. So again, if the blockchain was conceived as working as a system which works together, for us to reach consensus, it really is an appropriate metaphor for collaborative networks and for those of us who look at networks as being both offline and online. I think the point is that by building upon the scaffoldings of existing trust and relationships, people like me still believe that blockchain can spur thinking about data use and data ownership and data control. And here, this is my question to you. And what about the AI? We really need a decentralized, resilient model for the education we need and that our kids need. I take you back to the analogy of people at the moment being incarcerated in many universities around the world on the basis that that is what university education used to be all about. Third one is that if you want to do something, consider doing things and position them as pilots or sandboxes as a way of resisting, the resistance to change. That's certainly what I had used in 2016, okay? When I had said, let's look at pilots, we'll call this the Malta pilot. And it was very quick. We literally looked around the table. Is the University of Malta interested in joining this? No. Okay, fine. Is the Malta College of Arts, Sciences and Technologies interested? Yes, you're in. Sometimes on the basis that it's going to be a pilot, you will be able to administer the kind of change that you can only dream about. And in our case, we came up with something on the small island, which was deployed in education. A year later, less than a year later, the government of the Bahamas sent an entire delegation here. And what we did with blockchain for education identity records, the Bahamas has gone much further because they started introducing those into public identity records. Another point I want to make is that, consider using lifelong learning credentials to break down many institutional ideological silos. And here I'm talking within the education sector, okay? The idea is that, verifiable, tamper-proof credentials for learning are not going to go away in a hurry, okay? Everybody wants to have a piece of paper on his or her wall or their parents' walls, and just in credentials, That gives you the raison d'etre why education is still there. But however, if we start going beyond the idea of education being higher education, university education, we start thinking of lifelong learning and the labor market, these tend to be more receptive right now to self-sovereign identity, AI, and blockchain credentials than universities are. I repeat, at this stage in Malta, even though you have a nation state blockchain credentials pilot, which has been around since 2017, the University of Malta has still not joined. Okay. The last point I would like to make is closer to my world. If I want to make sense of the world as it's changing right now, as the US prepares to vote, and yet literally most of it is about fact-checking, lies, and people literally walling up their shops, okay, in anticipation of trouble. There's no harm in investing, as those of us who believe in emerging technologies, and also investing in digital and media literacies, by which I mean investing into young people's ability to engage with the attention economy, to actually focus for longer than 5 minutes, to understand how people will participate in this brave new world, how people can work together, and here how to critically consume what is sold to us as information. It's only on the basis of that that we can really engage with networks, real life world networks and online networks. So my last slides really are related to this. I really believe that digital disruption can be found sometimes in the most mundane of applications. In our case, we started with the credential because we believed that is almost like the lingua franca of anybody who goes into the education market from age 0 till age 100. And the second thing is that the alternative is not necessarily inferior. And my belief that the alternative is increasingly likely to become mainstream once COVID-19 is a memory. So that's what I had for you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. Checking for the chat if there's any question. And I can just share my screen for now.
Yeah, I can't show you the cat, but she's sitting on my printer at the moment.
Oh. Thanks, Alex. I think this is the point. Thanks again for making it all this way after your busy lecturing schedule. And we reached a point where we will stop broadcasting soon. Those of you that are interested in attending the next workshop about AI and games by Ero, Elias, and Kostas, it's going to be in Greek. You have received the Zoom link already in your emails, so please visit that. The workshop will start in about 10 minutes. And I hope you all enjoyed what you just saw here today, and hopefully you will stay with us for the further developments of LearnML within the next 2 years or so. There's more to come, more games and more educational scenario about AI and games for education. So thank you all. We can, Kostas, I guess.